Once upon a time, in the small town of Auchi, stood an ATM that never ran out of cash. No one knew how the ATM got there or who could have installed it. All they knew was that they woke up one morning to find an ATM station next to the town library. It was strange at first, but the people soon got used to it, seeing that it never ran out of cash, even when other ATMs around had no cash to dispense. No matter the hour of the day, the machine always had stacks of mint notes ready for whoever inserted their card. At first, only a few dared to use it. People like Mr. Bayomi, the carpenter, and Mama Nkechi who sold fruits by the roadside. But when they came back flaunting the mint notes that the ATM machine had dispensed, a huge crowd flooded the machine, waiting eagerly for their turn. And from that day on, the strange ATM became the people's choice. Even when other ATMs around were dispensing cash, the people preferred the strange ATM because of the mint notes that it dispensed. What they did not know was that the ATM did something to them that no one could ever imagine. One day, a girl named Chidima moved to Auchi to live with her fiance's mother for a few weeks. Her fiance Dozier insisted that she stays with his mother for a few weeks to learn how to properly care for him. Chidima agreed and moved to Auchi to live with his mother. It had barely been 2 hours since she arrived their home, and Dozier's mother sent her to the market to buy items to cook 7 pots of soup. Chidima, being the calm and obedient girl that she was, accepted without complaint. Mama Dozier handed her an ATM card and a long list of ingredients that she was going to buy from the nearby market. Use the ATM next to the library, Mama Dozier instructed. It's faster and the money there is always fresh. Chidima nodded politely, even though she was exhausted from her long trip. She made her way out of the house, asking for directions to the library, where she saw the ATM that she was asked to use. Chidima felt so uneasy. She stood in the line and watched as the people in front of her withdrew their fresh mint and walked away. She stood there patiently in the line till it was her turn. Then she slid in the card and withdrew the money that Dozier's mother had told her to withdraw. Chidima immediately rushed to the market to buy some afang leaves as well as other ingredients for the soup when something strange happened. A wave of dizziness washed over her as she fell to the ground unconscious. Hours later, her eyes fluttered open and Chidima found herself lying down on the floor in the market. People had gathered, wondering what had happened to her, and Chidima felt so ashamed of herself. She quickly got up from the ground, dusted herself up and rushed back home. It had been a few hours since she had left for the market, and her mother-in-law was so furious. She yelled at her angrily, asking where she had been and why she wasted much time at the market. Is this how you want to marry my son, you untrained woman? She said to Chidima, who apologized to her and tried to explain why she returned home late, but Dozier's mother was not willing to listen. She ordered Chidima to go cook the 7 pots of soup, and Chidima, without saying a word, hurried to the kitchen and began to prepare the soup, her hands trembling slightly from exhaustion and fear. One by one, she prepared the soups until the last one. The house was now filled with the rich aroma of spices and herbs, and Mama Dozier, still grumbling underneath her breath, sat at the dining table waiting to be served. Chidima served the food with trembling hands. She knew how good of a cook she was, but seeing how Dozier's mother had treated her in the past few hours made her terrified, and she couldn't predict how she would react. So, she stood back and watched as Dozier's mother dug into her meal without hesitation, slopping loudly as she chewed hungrily on the pieces of assorted meat as well as fish that Chidima had added. But barely a few minutes into eating, Mama Dozier began to cough violently. At first, Chidima thought it was just a regular cough, but the coughs grew louder and harsher as Mama Dozier clutched her throat and her eyes began to bulge wide with terror. She gasped for air, flailing her arms as she knocked over the plates and cups, requesting for water. Before Chidima could bring the water to her, Mama Dozier slumped on the table, her face turning pale as Chidima's eyes widened in terror. It all happened too fast, and Chidima could not bring herself to believe that her mother-in-law was now dead. She called her fiancé Dozier, who arrived at the house to find his mother dead. The neighbors, who had heard the commotion earlier, wasted no time in sharing their own versions of what had happened. Some said they saw Chidima standing and watching as Mama Dozie choked. Others swore that they heard Chidima beating up his mother. The stories grew wilder with each retelling, and by the time Dozie arrived, his heart was already filled with suspicion. At first, he listened to Chidima as she tearfully explained everything, from the ATM to the sudden fainting, to the incident with the fish bone. But Dozier's heart was cold. He stared at her, his once loving eyes now full of disgust and fear. "You brought bad luck into my family," he said bitterly. "If you hadn't come, my mother would still be alive." No amount of pleading or explanation could soften him. The next day, Dozie broke off the engagement and sent Chidima away. He didn't even allow her to pack properly as he pushed her out of his mother's house and warned her never to come close to him again. Chidima was so heartbroken. She returned back to her home and met her landlady, who had come to query her for her rent. Chidima, still carrying her traveling bag in hand, tried to explain to her landlady that she had just returned from a trip and would pay her rent soon, but her landlady insisted, saying that if she was unable to pay by the weekend, then she had to move out of the house or risk being reported to the authorities. Chidima begged and pleaded, but her landlady was unmoved. With a stern warning, her landlady stormed off, muttering about how some tenants turned out to be irresponsible. Exhausted and heartbroken, Chidima dragged herself into her tiny room as she collapsed on the bed, weeping bitterly. She cried until her throat hurt and her chest ached in a way that she could not describe. Whenever she closed her eyes, Dozier's mother's last moments replayed in her mind over and over again. Chidima found it hard to sleep. She knew that she had to resume work the next morning if she ever wanted to pay her rent. She was not as privileged as others and knew that she had to work twice as hard. So by morning, she got herself up and got dressed, ready to go resume her job at the daycare. As she walked towards the junction, Chidima caught sight of a group of people who were gathered in the distance. The scene looked chaotic, and Chidima could not help but walk towards them to see what was happening. To her greatest surprise, she saw her landlady dead on the floor. A huge truck had crushed her the night before as she tried to cross the road. Chidima could not help but panic. She ran back to her room and shut the door. Her breathing was sharp and ragged as she leaned against the door. Her mind raced wildly, refusing to settle. 2 people dead after having an encounter with her. At first, Chidima wanted to convince herself that it was just a coincidence, a cruel, horrible coincidence, but something deep inside of her believed otherwise. The deaths were not ordinary, and Chidima could feel it in her gut. She knew that something was wrong, and whatever it is, started after she used the strange ATM by the library. She knew better than to go to work, with all these unexplainable deaths hovering around her. As she sat there confused, her phone began to ring, and Chidima was so terrified to pick. She stared blankly at the phone screen, wondering who the caller could be. It was an unknown number, and Chidima summoned all the courage to pick. "Hello," she said with a shaky voice, as the caller warned her never to look anyone in the eyes. "You'll mark them, and they'll die," the caller said, revealing that the ATM was cursed. The caller revealed that Chidima had to break the curse fast, or be the death of everyone that she came across. Chidima stood there frozen as the line went dead. She remembered her poor mother, who she abandoned because of her love for Dozie. Chidima could remember her mother's stern warning that her relationship with Dozie would end up ruining her life. She remembered how her mother did everything to break them apart, claiming that she had a revelation about a darkness that was looming ahead. A fresh wave of guilt slammed into her heart, making her to stagger as she began to speak to herself. Mother had tried to warn me, but I didn't listen. Now, she had nowhere else to turn, but back to the very woman who she had shunned and insulted in the past. Chidima remembered how she called her mother a bitter old woman who would stop at nothing to see her miserable like herself. Trembling from head to toe, Chidima packed a small bag and boarded the next bus to her hometown, a place where she had sworn never to return to. The journey felt endless, with every second dragging like an eternity. All through the bumpy ride, she avoided eye contact with the passengers, clutching the bus seat so tightly that her knuckles began to turn pale. On their way, a group of armed men shot at their bus, bringing it to a complete stop. "Get to the ground!" they screamed out to the passengers, who all scrambled to the ground face down. The armed men moved from passenger to passenger, collecting phones, wallets, jewelries, anything of value that the passengers had on them. Chidima lay frozen on the ground, her heart pounding like a drum against her ribs. She dared not lift her head. She dared not look at them. But fate, it seemed, was not done with her yet. One of the robbers stormed towards her and stopped. He grabbed her hair and yanked her head up, forcing her to look into his eyes. The moment their gaze locked, Chidima felt a sharp sting behind her eyes. Then, something strange began to happen. The robber began to convulse violently. His body twisted unnaturally as he let out a blood-curdling scream that terrified everyone that was present. They all lay on the ground terrified as they watched the robber's tongue grow so big, stretching out of his mouth like a monstrous slug. His eyes rolled to the back of his head, and with one final violent jerk, he collapsed to the ground lifeless. A heavy silence fell over the scene, and the other robbers, struck dumb with terror, forgot the passengers entirely. They dropped their weapons and took off into the bush like frightened animals, tripping over themselves in panic. The bus driver, shaking uncontrollably, managed to scramble to his feet. "Go! Go!" he screamed at the passengers, who all boarded the bus terrified. No one dared to sit close to Chidima or look her in the face. The bus roared back to life and sped away, the tires throwing dust and gravel into the air. The passengers clung to their seats, trembling as they cast weary glances at Chidima, who sat at the back of the bus isolated and broken. When they finally arrived at her village, no one needed to be told. The moment the bus slowed down, the passengers scrambled out, desperate to be rid of her presence. Even the driver avoided looking at her as he threw her bag to the ground and sped off. Chidima stood alone on the dusty road, her heart thudding heavily as she made her way to her mother's house. When she arrived, she hesitated at the door, but before she could knock, it swung open with a creak. Standing there, tall and stern, was a young woman who she had never seen before. Chidima froze for a moment as she asked the woman who she was. "Come on in," the woman said to Chidima, who followed her into the house, hoping to see her mother. But no one was home, only the strange woman, who revealed to her that her mother was dead. "When you left on that fateful day, your mother never told you that she was dying. She had long been diagnosed of cancer, but didn't want you to worry, so she didn't tell you. I was her personal nurse, who cared for her till her death. Before she died, she pleaded with me to look out for you, and I've been doing exactly that." Chidima's eyes filled with tears as she tried to come to terms with the fact that her mother was dead. The young woman then revealed to her that she was the one who called to warn her about the evil ATM. Chidima's hands trembled as she wiped her tears. She asked the young woman how she knew so much about the ATM, and the woman, whose name was Ogo, revealed that she had the gift of seeing. "Since I was a child, I could see things that others could not." Chidima listened in silence, her heart thudding as she continued to listen. "The ATM is not a machine," Ogo continued. "It's the mouth of an ancient being whose mission is to take as much lives as possible. Everyone who used the evil ATM was marked to bring more souls for the being. Every money dispensed, every fresh mint the machine vomited, was obtained from the blood of one who was sacrificed to the being. That's why the machine never ran out of money. And because you touched its offering," Ogo said softly, "you became its chosen vessel. Death now lives through your gaze. You and the hundreds who have used the ATM are now vessels of death." Chidima's blood ran cold as she continued to listen, her knees buckling beneath her. "I didn't know," she whispered, her voice breaking, as Ogo nodded. "Most of you never knew. That is how it traps you." Tears welled up in Chidima's eyes as she asked what she could do and how she was going to stop it. Ogo stepped closer, her expression grave, as she revealed to Chidima that there was only one way. You have to ensure that no one uses the machine for 72 hours. If no one uses the ATM for that long, its power will diminish and the spirit will be starved, forced to relinquish its hold on the people forever. Chidima stood there, wondering how she was going to stop the people from using their special ATM. She knew how much they loved it and knew how difficult it was going to be to stop them. She arrived at Auchi a few hours later with her dark shades on and met a long queue of people lined up to withdraw some money. Chidima tried to stop them, revealing that the ATM was evil, but no one cared to listen, as all they wanted was their mint notes. Chidima did everything possible, including blocking the ATM's entrance, but the people pushed her away to gain access to the machine. Then, she decided to do something out of the ordinary. She waited till night, when the queue finally dispersed. Chidima turned her clothes to rags and presented herself as a mad woman. She sat in front of the machine, cross-legged, with a huge stick in her hand. When morning finally came, the people recoiled in horror to see a mad woman sitting in front of the machine. The few brave ones tried to inch closer, but Chidima sprang to her feet with a surprising speed as she chased them away with the stick, threatening to curse them all. The crowd scattered like dry leaves in the wind, screaming and jumping over gutters to avoid the mad woman who was now guarding their beloved machine. It was over 24 hours, and Chidima succeeded in keeping the people away. But not everyone was so easily frightened by her. A certain man named Mr. Okoli, known for his arrogance and stubbornness, arrived. He had no fear for anyone and was not willing to allow a mad woman stop him from withdrawing some money. "I don't fear mad people," he said loudly as he walked towards the ATM. Chidima, still acting possessed, sprang up from the ground, swinging her heavy stick and saying words that made everyone's blood run cold. The people begged Mr. Okoli to go back, but his pride blinded him. With a mocking laughter, he pulled out a crumbled note from his pocket and threw it at her, commanding her to leave his way immediately. But Chidima was relentless. She could not risk anyone using the ATM, so she had to do something about it. As she stood there, her eyes caught sight of Dozier, who was strolling across the road, hand in hand with another woman. Chidima's heart stopped, and for a moment, she wondered how he was still alive. Then, she remembered that Dozier never looked her in the eyes. Chidima could not believe how fast Dozier had moved on. The betrayer stabbed deeper than any dagger could. He didn't even give her a chance to explain on that day. Now, here he was, laughing, happy, as if she never existed, as if she was nothing but a forgotten stain in his past. The anger and heartbreak boiled inside of her like lava, but just as quickly as the pain rose, Chidima shook it off. This was not the time to fall apart. This was not the time to be weak. She had a battle to fight, a battle for her own soul and the souls that had been marked. Mr. Okoli, seeing how distracted she was, made his way to the ATM, inserting his card as he rained insults at her. Chidima, in that moment, made a bold decision that she believed would work. She grabbed the heavy stick from the floor and struck the ATM screen with all her might, watching it shatter before her eyes. What they saw was something that they never expected to see. Blood gushed out of the machine, splashing across Mr. Okoye's face and staining the entire ground. The crowd gasped in horror. It wasn't water. It wasn't oil. It was real thick dark blood pouring out of the broken ATM like a severed artery. The stench of death filled the air immediately, a rotten, nauseating smell that made many of the onlookers vomit on the spot. Children screamed. Adults fled. Some fell to their knees as they did the mark of the cross and cried to God for help. But it was already too late for Mr. Okoli, who stood frozen, staring in disbelief as a huge mist enveloped the ATM and himself, causing them to disappear. The cursed ATM was gone, and the people were now free from its hold. News of the incident spread like wildfire, and by sunset, every household in Auchi had heard all that happened. The cursed ATM, the death, and the girl who risked her life by becoming a mad woman to save them all. News of this spread around the state, reaching the ears of the governor, who decided to recognize her for all that she did. Chidinma was given several awards, and top NGOs in the state offered her top jobs in their establishment. But that wasn't all. The people had taken a collection amongst themselves. Poor farmers, rich traders, taxi drivers, students, everyone gave what they could, and they presented Chidinma with a large envelope filled with money enough to buy her a new home and start a new life for herself. Tears filled Chidinma's eyes as she accepted the gifts. She could not believe what was happening. After being despised, humiliated, and abandoned, she was now celebrated, loved, and honored. Chidinma wished that her mother was alive to witness all of these wonderful things. She regretted all the terrible things she said to her mother and wished that she could turn back the hands of time. Meanwhile, far in the crowd, Dozie stood back and watched as the whole town celebrated Chidinma. He remembered how quickly he had thrown her away, how he hadn't even listened to her explanation, believing that she was responsible for his mother's death. Now, with the truth out there in the open, Dozie regretted all that he did to her. He was now with another woman and lived the remainder of his life in regret. Chidinma, however, became the most celebrated woman in the state, known not just for her beauty, but for her wisdom, courage, and kindness. The lesson to be learned from this story is that you should never judge people too quickly, especially when you don't know the full story. Sometimes, the very person you cast away in your moments of anger could be the one who holds the key to your deliverance. Patience, trust, and kindness are virtues that must never be thrown aside because of fear, pride, or rumors. And above all, those who endure pain with courage and a pure heart will one day be honored, whilst those who judge hastily will live with the heavy burden of regret. In life, remember, truth always rises to the surface, and light always overcomes darkness. Just like Chidinma, no matter how much you are misunderstood today, stay true to yourself, for in the end, your story will inspire others, and you will shine brighter than you ever imagined. I hope you enjoyed the story.